Mariner's Cove had a way of holding time still, as if the waves themselves were guardians of memory. The sun sank toward the horizon, bleeding gold, orange, and violet across the sky. Seagulls called, their cries slicing the gentle lull of the ocean. For most, the town was a quiet retreat, a pause from life's chaos. For Ava Monroe, it was a promise of solace, a chance to untangle herself from a life too loud, too fast. She walked slowly along the pier, the soft tap of her boots on the worn wood echoing faintly against the lapping waves. Her auburn hair, caught by the evening breeze, framed a face lined with subtle traces of longing and fatigue. But tonight, the air was different, charged with a quiet electricity, as though the universe had decided to conspire for one brief, irrevocable moment. Across the pier, leaning casually against the railing, stood Julian Hart. He seemed almost sculpted from the setting sun, his dark brown hair catching hints of gold, jawline sharp, eyes fixed on the horizon yet alert to the world around him. There was a tension in his posture, restrained power, a quiet intensity that drew the eye like a magnet. Ava's heart thudded unexpectedly in her chest. She didn't know him. She had never seen him before. And yet, she felt as if her life had been waiting for this encounter. Julian's gaze flicked toward her, and in that instant, an unspoken recognition passed between them, one he could not name and she could not understand. The ocean seemed to hush. The air grew taut, as if even the wind were holding its breath. Ava whispered, almost inaudibly, "I feel like I should know him." Julian said nothing. He only looked at her, a storm of emotion shadowing his calm exterior, before turning back toward the fading light on the horizon. Ava moved forward, compelled by a force she could neither define nor resist. Julian lingered for a heartbeat, then followed, their steps falling into an unspoken rhythm with the soft slap of waves beneath the pier. The air between them thrummed with an invisible current, pulling them closer. It was the rare kind of connection that required no explanation. A glance, a subtle shift of weight, a breath drawn at the same time. These were enough to forge a bond deeper than words. Finally, Julian spoke, voice low, calm, and deliberate. "You're new here?" Ava smiled faintly, a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. "I just came back for a while. Needed a break, I guess." Julian's lips curved subtly. "Breaks are good. Sometimes, the ocean fixes things words can't." In that simple exchange, the first fragile thread of connection was woven. Neither understood its weight yet, but both felt it an undeniable pull they would not escape. The lighthouse perched on the cliff like a silent sentinel, white against the deepening indigo of the evening sky. Waves smashed against jagged rocks below, white foam erupting and retreating in endless rhythm. Julian leaned on the railing at the top, gaze locked on the horizon where the sun had kissed the ocean goodnight. Ava approached quietly, sensing both the quiet storm he carried and the layers of solitude he hid behind his composed exterior. For a long suspended moment, they simply existed side by side, the world fading into the background. The sky glowed with fire and shadow. The ocean roared beneath them, and somewhere between the air and the light, Ava felt a memory she could not place, a familiarity that should not have existed, yet did. Julian finally broke the silence. "I'm Julian," Ava replied softly, almost afraid her voice would shatter the moment. Ava Monroe." It was ordinary, it was simple, and yet it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken chapters. That fleeting introduction was the start of something inevitable. Over the following days, fate seemed determined to weave their paths together. Julian appeared at the market, on the pier, even near the cliffs where the gulls circled endlessly. Words were scarce, often unnecessary. A glance, a brief touch of hands, the way their eyes lingered on one another, these moments spoke louder than any conversation. One evening, as the tide whispered against the shore, Ava stumbled over a piece of driftwood. Julian caught her wrist instinctively. "Careful," he murmured. "I'm fine," she replied softly, breathless from both the near fall and the flutter of her heartbeat. "But, thank you." It was in moments like these, small, fleeting, quiet, that the beginnings of love took root. They were falling, slowly, almost imperceptibly, into a bond neither fully understood, yet neither could resist. But even as the days of quiet intimacy passed, shadows began to stir. Julian's phone buzzed one evening. He glanced at the screen, eyes darkening, before slipping it back into his pocket without explanation. Ava noticed a subtle unease curling in her chest. Sometimes, the silence speaks louder than words. She did not ask, sensing the weight of the secret he carried. The warning lingered, unspoken but undeniable. The world around them was preparing to shift, to shatter. The Lantern Festival transformed Mariner's Cove into a dreamscape. Thousands of glowing lanterns floated into the night sky, carrying wishes, secrets, and memories. Music drifted from stalls, mixing with laughter, and the occasional cry of children darting through the crowds painted faces alight with wonder. Ava wandered through the festival, absorbed by the kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. Julian followed at a respectful distance, unable to look away. He observed every detail, the way the lanterns illuminated her hair, the curve of her smile, the gleam of excitement in her eyes. Even amid the festival's beauty, a subtle unease lingered. The night's perfection was a fragile illusion. An unseen force waited, patient and precise, ready to tear their fragile world apart. From the cliffside road, headlights cut through the darkness, moving too fast, too recklessly. Julian's pulse surged. "Ava, look out!" he shouted, his voice swallowed by the wind and crashing waves. The car swerved violently. Tires screeched. Metal collided with wood and stone. A scream ripped through the night, sharper than the music and laughter. Lanterns wavered above, their reflections fracturing in the puddles of rain. The world spun. Ava was thrown forward. Julian lunged, but the night swallowed her. Chaos and silence collided, leaving only smoke, shattered glass, and the scent of salt and fear. When the storm settled, the harbor was quiet again. Lanterns floated dimly in puddles. The music had ended, and in that stillness, Julian reached for her and found only absence. Days later, Ava awoke in a stark hospital room. The antiseptic sting filled her senses. Her head throbbed. Her memories were fragments, broken and sharp. Figures hovered: nurses, doctors, concerned voices, but the one face she longed for most was gone. Ava whispered, barely audible, "Julian?" No answer. Only the white walls, the hum of machines, and a void where love should have been. Clara, holding her hand, spoke gently. "You're safe, Ava. We'll figure this out, together." Safe, but incomplete. The absence of Julian stretched across her consciousness. A shadow of longing she could not yet understand. Outside, Julian watched, silent and heavy with the secret that could destroy everything if revealed too soon. The waves continued their relentless rhythm. Lanterns drifted in the wind. Between memory and oblivion, light and darkness, one question lingered. When tomorrow breaks, will love survive what has already begun? The morning light slanted through the blinds, cutting lines of gold across the sterile walls of the hospital room. Ava Monroe stirred beneath crisp white sheets, her eyes fluttering open to a world both familiar and strange. The antiseptic scent clung to the air, sharp and unwelcome, while the faint hum of machines reminded her she was alive, yet fragile. Memory was a fractured mirror, each shard reflecting fragments of the life she had lost. Faces blurred, names escaped her lips, and yet there were shadows, flashes of familiarity that made her heart ache with confusion. She tried to reach for them, but they slipped away, like sand through trembling fingers. Clara, sitting quietly in a chair by the bedside, noticed Ava's unrest. "You're awake," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" I don't know," Ava admitted, voice hoarse, uncertain. "Everything's fuzzy. I feel like I should remember, but I can't." Clara's expression softened. "That's okay. Memories come back in their own time. Right now, you need to focus on being here, on healing." Ava nodded, yet inside, a quiet frustration simmered. Healing the body was simple. Healing the mind, the soul, the spaces where love and memory once intertwined, was a different kind of trial. She closed her eyes, listening to the faint rhythm of her own heartbeat, hoping it would whisper clues from the past. Outside the hospital, Julian Hart lingered in the shadows of the parking lot. He had watched Ava awake, observed the tremors in her hands, the fleeting confusion in her eyes. Every instinct screamed at him to rush forward, to take her into his arms and reassure her. But the secret he carried was a weight too dangerous to risk revealing now. The accident had been no accident. And if Ava remembered, if the truth surfaced too soon, it could shatter the fragile world they were beginning to rebuild. For now, Julian stayed silent, a ghost of presence, hoping that patience would weave the strands of memory back in time. He whispered into the wind, as if she could hear him. "I'm here, Ava, even if you can't see me yet." Days passed, and Ava began physical therapy. Tentative walks along the hospital corridors, her mind drifting in and out of lucidity. It was during one quiet afternoon, as she watched sunlight ripple across the polished floor, that something unusual happened. A small notebook slid from a cart across the hallway and landed near her feet. She picked it up, flipping through pages filled with sketches, waves, cliffs, a lighthouse. Her breath caught. One image, more than the others, felt like a pulse in her chest. A lighthouse, a cliff, a figure standing against the horizon. A shiver ran through her spine. The memory teased her, tantalizingly incomplete. She did not know why her heart ached at the image, nor why the name Julian surfaced faintly in her thoughts, whispering without context. Clara noticed her pause. "Found something?" Ava shook her head. I don't know. It feels familiar, but I can't remember." Familiarity was a dangerous thing. It pulled at the edges of the mind, inviting curiosity, stirring longing, awakening desires one could not name. And Ava's heart, fragile and unguarded, began to respond to echoes she did not yet understand. Julian began appearing in quiet ways. Sometimes she would see him from a distance in the hospital garden, the early morning mist curling around his silhouette. Sometimes he would be at the local cafe where she had gone for a tentative cup of coffee, his gaze lingering on her without intrusion. Every appearance was a test, a careful probe into the delicate fabric of her memory. He did not speak of the past, did not push. Instead, he allowed the moments themselves to speak. A shared glance, the briefest touch of hands when passing, a half-smile that carried unspoken understanding. Each fragment was a breadcrumb on a path back to him. Yet the trail was perilous. One wrong step, one forced recollection, and the delicate balance could collapse entirely. Julian bore the burden of that risk silently, every heartbeat a reminder of what was at stake. Ava's return to Mariner's Cove had drawn attention. Derek Vaughn, her childhood friend and occasional rival, had arrived seemingly by chance at the hospital. Concern etched across his face. His presence was warm, familiar, but tinged with an unsettling edge, the kind that provoked unease more than comfort. "Hey," Derek said, a practiced smile on his lips. "You're finally awake." Ava nodded weakly. I think so." Derek's intentions were unclear, even to him. Protective, perhaps. Curious, certainly. And in the delicate dance between love, memory, and hidden truths, his involvement would prove both a comfort and a complication. Meanwhile, hospital staff and townspeople whispered quietly about Ava's miraculous survival. Rumors of the accident, some grounded in truth, some in exaggeration, swirled like smoke through the corridors. Julian remained distant, careful, vigilant, knowing that every word spoken, every glance observed, could tip the scales of fate. Late at night, Ava lay in her hospital bed, the hum of machines and the occasional creak of the building providing a lullaby she could neither fully trust nor fully escape. Sleep brought dreams, fragments of another life, disjointed yet vivid, a lighthouse at sunset, laughter echoing across cliffs, the brush of hands, eyes meeting in a gaze that burned deeper than the ocean. She woke with tears streaking her cheeks, a name rolling off her tongue before she could stop it. Julian. Each fragment was a shard of memory too delicate to reconstruct fully. Each piece brought both pain and longing. The world she had known, the life she had lost, hovered just out of reach, teasing her with both promise and torment. Julian approached cautiously one morning in the hospital garden, the sun still low, casting long shadows across the gravel paths. Ava was sitting on a bench, sketching waves in a small notebook, her concentration intense. He stopped a few feet away, unsure if he should call her name. Finally, he spoke softly. "Mind if I sit?" Ava looked up, surprised, a faint recognition flickering in her eyes. I don't mind." They sat in silence, the wind carrying the scent of salt and blooming flowers. Julian's presence was a comfort, yet also a reminder of the void she could not name. He did not speak of the past, only allowed her the space to explore the fragments she could reach, guiding gently without forcing. Not everyone in Mariner's Cove welcomed the delicate unfolding of their story. Derek's unease grew, subtle, yet persistent. He watched Julian from afar, sensing danger he could not define. The hospital staff whispered behind closed doors, and somewhere, invisible hands had already begun to manipulate circumstances, steering events toward consequences none of them could yet anticipate. Even as Ava sketched, walked, and glimpsed flashes of memory, an invisible clock ticked relentlessly. The accident's true nature was a secret that could destroy everything, a hidden betrayal ready to surface at the most devastating moment. Ava received a visitor one afternoon. Lena, a woman who claimed to be concerned about her recovery. Her smile was warm, almost too polished. Her words carried subtle insinuations, questions that nudged Ava toward doubt and confusion. "I just want you to rest," Lena said, her tone soft, almost soothing. "Some things are better left forgotten, Ava. Memories can hurt more than they heal." Ava felt a chill, despite the warm sunlight. Something about Lena's presence felt off. Yet, she could not place why. The seed of mistrust had been planted, growing quietly beneath the fragile surface of her mind. Julian watched from the shadows as Ava interacted with Lena, a tight knot of tension in his chest. Every instinct told him to step forward, to warn her, to reclaim the truth she had lost. But he knew the timing was delicate. Any revelation too soon could fracture the fragile bond they were beginning to rebuild. His patience was a trial. Each day stretched endlessly. Every interaction with Ava a delicate negotiation between proximity and distance, between protection and honesty. The love he bore was both a shield and a weapon, and he wielded it carefully, even as it threatened to consume him. One evening, Ava returned to the hospital garden, notebook in hand. She paused at the bench, staring at the fading sunlight on the horizon. A sudden noise, a door slamming, voices raised, drew her attention. She turned, and for a fleeting moment, her eyes met someone she did not recognize, yet who seemed impossibly familiar. Julian's heart clenched at the sight, knowing the moment was coming, the revelation, the memory, the betrayal. Outside the walls of the hospital, shadows moved, plans unfolded, and forces that had remained dormant began to stir. The past, fragmented and fragile, pressed against the present. Secrets waited, patient and relentless. And one question hovered over Mariner's Cove, carried by wind, waves, and whispered fears. When tomorrow comes, who will survive the truth? The morning fog clung to the garden like a gentle shroud, softening the outlines of trees, benches, and the distant lighthouse. Ava walked along the winding gravel paths, notebook clutched in her hands, tracing waves and cliffs with the tip of her pen. The sketches had become a ritual, a silent map of memory, fragments she could not name but could feel pulsing beneath her skin. Each stroke of the pencil brought whispers of another life, laughter she could not place, a familiar weight in the chest, a gaze that lingered longer than a stranger's should. She shivered, her mind caught between the life she remembered and the one she had lost. A soft voice interrupted the quiet. "You always draw the ocean this way?" Julian stood at the edge of the garden, the early light glinting off his dark hair, eyes steady and careful. He had learned to approach her gently, offering presence without forcing the pieces of the past into place. Ava looked up, startled, blinking. I don't know. It feels right." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both reassurance and restraint. He wanted to tell her everything, to pull back the curtain of memory and restore the past. But the secret he carried was a sword that could cut deeper than any truth she could handle right now. Over the next days, Ava's dreams became sharper, vivid, and disjointed. She saw cliffs bathed in sunset, a lighthouse against crimson skies, hands brushing lightly over hers, laughter echoing through empty corridors. She awoke with a start, heart racing, the word Julian trembling on her lips before she could stop it. Each fragment teased her, enticing, confusing, threatening to unmoor her from the fragile grip on her present. She walked through the hospital, notebook tucked under her arm, searching for clarity in the faces around her. Every glance, every familiar curve in the scenery, ignited a spark of recognition she could not explain. Clara noticed her agitation. "You've been restless," she said. "You need to take it slow. Memories? They don't come back all at once. Ava shook her head. But it's like something's trying to push me to remember. And I don't know if I want it or if I can handle it. And in the quiet corners of the hospital, Julian watched, heart caught between fear and longing. Every attempt to shield her from the truth felt like betrayal, yet honesty too soon could destroy the fragile trust they had built. Outside the sanctuary of the hospital, Mariner's Cove moved in rhythms both predictable and dangerous. Derek Vaughn, Ava's childhood friend, lingered on the edges of her recovery, offering help, concern, and questions designed to pry into what he suspected but could not know. "I just want you to be safe," he said, tone firm, shadowed with unspoken fear. "There's more to what happened than anyone's telling you." Ava's confusion deepened. She wanted to trust him, but something about the intensity in his eyes set her nerves on edge. Behind the warmth, she sensed a storm, one she could neither predict nor evade. Meanwhile, Lena's visits became increasingly pointed. A casual comment here, a worried suggestion there, each one carefully designed to steer Ava away from thoughts that could trigger dangerous memories. "You don't want to dig too deep," Lena warned softly, almost conspiratorially. "Some things are better left buried." Ava felt the pull of instinct, a flicker of mistrust she could not name. Her mind was a battlefield, memory against deception, longing against fear. And in that tension, Julian's presence became both anchor and torment. Julian walked the pier alone one evening, waves pounding against the pilings beneath his feet. The wind tore at his jacket, tugged at his hair, as if the sea itself were testing his resolve. He knew the time was coming, the moment when Ava would demand the truth, when the fragments of memory would become a storm. He wanted to confess, to lay bare the accident, the manipulation, the secret that had haunted him since that fateful night. But he could not. Not yet. Not until he could protect her from the consequences, until he could ensure that love itself could survive the revelation. Julian whispered to the wind, bitter and longing, "Soon, Ava. Soon you'll know. But not yet. Not until I can keep you safe." Ava's days were a swirl of hope and fear. Every small gesture from Julian, every fleeting familiarity, both comforted and tormented her. She wanted to reach for him, to demand the connection she felt but could not explain. And yet, doubts gnawed at her, spurred by Derek's warnings and Lena's veiled suggestions. Her sketches grew frantic. Waves crashed with sharper intensity. Lighthouses loomed larger on the page. Faces appeared in her drawings, half-formed, unfamiliar yet intimate. She clutched her notebook as if it were a talisman against the unknown, against the past she could not remember, but that pressed relentlessly against her consciousness. Ava whispered, voice trembling, "I can feel him. I don't know if I can trust what I feel." Julian found ways to be near without overwhelming her. A cup of coffee left at her bedside. A blanket draped over her shoulders during physical therapy. A hand brushing against hers when passing through the garden. Each act was small, almost invisible to anyone else, yet each sent currents of longing through both their hearts. They were entwined in a dance of restraint, each knowing the stakes, each aching for closeness, yet bound by secrets that could fracture everything if revealed too soon. Late nights brought restless dreams. Ava saw herself on the cliffs, standing beside a man whose face she could not fully remember, yet whose presence ignited a deep ache in her chest. The wind whipped her hair around her face. The ocean roared beneath her feet, and then his hand, brushing hers, a glance that lingered, and the whisper of a name, Julian. She awoke, trembling, unable to place the dream in reality or fantasy. The fragments were sharp, tantalizing, maddening in their incompleteness. Yet they were real, and they were dangerous. Derek observed the interactions between Julian and Ava with increasing wariness. He did not know the full truth of the accident, but he sensed something unspoken, a secret that hung between them like a storm cloud. His protective instincts collided with jealousy, suspicion, and the fear that the fragile bond between them could be shattered by forces beyond their understanding. Derek muttered under his breath, "There's more going on than she knows, and he's hiding it." His interference, though subtle, began to ripple through Ava's fragile emotional state, introducing uncertainty and tension that even Julian could not control. Scene: the lure of the past. Ava wandered the cliffs one evening, the lighthouse casting a long shadow across the jagged rocks. The ocean thundered below, waves tossing white foam into the darkening sky. She could feel the fragments of memory pulsing beneath her skin, whispers of the past calling her name. Julian followed at a distance, unseen. Every step he took was measured, cautious, a silent promise to protect her. He could not speak. He could not reveal. The truth would have to wait. For now, their connection existed in gestures, glances, and the unspoken bond of recognition. Scene. Climactic emotional confrontation. The next day, Ava's frustration erupted. She confronted Julian in the hospital garden, notebook clutched tightly, sketches scattered like desperate cries across the gravel. "Why won't you tell me?" she demanded, voice trembling. "I feel like something is being taken from me." Julian took a careful step closer, heart aching. "Ava, I can't. Not yet. I need to protect you." Her hands shook. Her vision blurred with tears. Protect me? Or keep me from remembering? The air between them was taut, crackling with unspoken truths, fear, and desire. Every heartbeat carried weight, every glance a silent plea. And just as the tension reached its peak, a sudden, unseen figure appeared behind Ava. Someone who would disrupt everything in the fragile world they had begun to rebuild. Ava turned slowly, startled, and the face she saw was one she should have trusted, yet did not. Lena's eyes held a strange mix of concern and calculation. Derek appeared behind her, expression tight with suspicion. Julian's chest tightened. The threads of their fragile existence trembled, threatened by the colliding forces of memory, deception, and unspoken secrets. The past pressed in. The present teetered on the edge of revelation. And in the space between, one question burned brighter than any lantern in Mariner's Cove. When tomorrow comes, who will survive the truths that have been kept hidden for so long? Before the sun breached the horizon, Mariner's Cove lay in a quiet, expectant hush. Mist curled around the edges of the cliffs, softening the jagged rocks and the white caps of waves crashing below. Ava stood at the precipice, notebook clutched tightly in her hands, the sketches within chaotic yet precise a map of memory she could now piece together. She remembered everything, every laugh, every touch, every stolen glance with Julian, the way his presence had been a constant pulse through her fragmented recollections. The accident that had robbed her of memory, the subtle manipulations that had kept her from the truth, every hidden betrayal now unfolded clearly in her mind. The clarity was both relief and agony, a tempest of emotions crashing through her chest. Ava whispered into the mist, "Julian!" The wind carried her voice across the cliffs, over the white foam and jagged rocks, toward the figure waiting in the shadows. Julian stepped forward, cautious yet desperate. His face held the tension of months spent in silence, every day a test of restraint. "I'm here," he said softly, his voice steady despite the storm in his eyes. "I never left." Ava's eyes widened as recognition struck fully, not just in fragments, but in the entirety of memory and emotion. Her knees trembled, and Julian moved closer, tentatively, hands outstretched but respectful of the space she needed. I remember everything," Ava said, voice quivering, a mix of joy and pain. "The accident, the hospital, you." Julian nodded, swallowing a breath he had held for far too long. "I couldn't tell you then. It wasn't safe. You had to recover, to heal, before the truth could reach you. I tried to protect you." Her chest ached, relief warred with anger. Confusion clashed with longing. The truth was heavy, but the bond between them, tempered by time and absence, was unbreakable. Why didn't you come back sooner?" she whispered, tears tracing down her cheeks. "I stayed," Julian admitted, voice taut with emotion. "Watching, waiting, hoping you'd find the pieces on your own, hoping you'd forgive me when you understood." For a heartbeat, the world held still. The wind stilled, the waves paused mid-crash, and the mist wove around them like a protective veil. In that suspended moment, the past and present collided, and love tested, tormented, but unbroken rose like a tide between them. No story of love is complete without confrontation. Lena's presence emerged silently at the edge of the cliff. Eyes sharp, lips tight, the tension palpable. She had maneuvered Ava's life, planting doubt, hiding truths, manipulating what she believed was right for herself, but the full reckoning could no longer be delayed. Why? Ava demanded, voice trembling with fury. Why all of it? The lies, the manipulation, why? Lena's gaze faltered, almost human, before hardening again. I did it to protect you. From the truth. From pain. Pain? Ava's voice rose. You took my life, Lena. My memories. My love. You decided what I could know, what I could feel. That's not protection, that's control. Julian stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on Ava's shoulder. The past is over, he said quietly. But the future, that's ours to claim. Whatever she did cannot change what we feel. It cannot undo what we've survived. The words hung in the salty air. Lena's defenses faltered under the weight of their truth. She looked at Ava, perhaps for the first time seeing the woman she had tried to shape but had never truly understood. Derek, who had lingered in shadows and intentions, stepped forward. His expression was a mix of guilt and resolve. I should have trusted you, he admitted. I didn't know the full story. I thought I was protecting you, but I only added more confusion. I'm sorry, Ava. Ava met his gaze, eyes firm but forgiving. We all acted from fear, but the truth is stronger than fear. The web of tension began to unravel. The sides of love, deception, and protection collided and separated. In that space, Ava reclaimed her agency, understanding fully what had been done and who truly stood beside her when it mattered most. At last, Julian spoke the words he had carried alone for far too long. The accident wasn't an accident, he said, voice heavy. It was orchestrated. Someone wanted to erase the life we had together, to manipulate what you'd remember. I couldn't stop it in time, but I could stay. I could make sure you survived. Ava's breath caught. Her body shook. The revelation hit like a thunderclap, both terrifying and relieving. She understood now why the fragments of memory had felt both incomplete and insistent, why her heart had recognized him without knowing how or why. They stood together on the cliff, wind whipping around them, ocean roaring below, a world that had almost torn them apart now witness to their reunion. Pain, betrayal, and love mingled into one tidal surge that carried them forward. Ava reached out, hands trembling, and touched Julian's face. I remember us. Everything, she said softly. And even with the lies, the fear, I still choose you. Julian closed his eyes, holding her hands against his chest. And I choose you. Every day, every moment, I choose you. For a long moment, the world fell away. Only they existed, two souls reunited after storms of memory and deception, standing against the wind, the ocean, the past itself. Love had endured. Love had survived. Derek nodded, stepping back. I see now, he said quietly. You belong together. Nothing else matters. Lena remained on the edge, expression unreadable. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. I hope you're happy, she whispered. I only wanted what I thought was best. But you've earned your own choice. Mariner's Cove exhaled with them, waves crashing rhythmically, birds rising and circling, the lighthouse a sentinel shining its light across the cliffs. The town, once silent with uncertainty, now held a quiet promise of peace and continuity. The sun finally breached the horizon, spilling gold across the ocean and illuminating the cliffs in a warm, forgiving light. Ava and Julian walked hand in hand, bare feet brushing the sand, hearts synchronized with the rhythm of the waves. Ava leaned into him, voice soft. We made it, against everything. Julian kissed the top of her head, holding her close. Against everything. And we'll keep making it together. In that moment, love was no longer fragile, no longer tentative. It was alive, whole, and resilient. The storm had passed, but its lessons remained. Truth, patience, courage, and the undeniable power of a bond that could survive betrayal, memory, and time itself. Mariner's Cove awoke to a new day, sunlight glinting off the waves, children running along the piers, laughter mingling with gulls' cries. The lighthouse shone proudly, a beacon of hope and continuity. Ava and Julian stood at the edge of the water, notebook forgotten in the sand, eyes locked, hearts aligned. The past had tested them. The present had reunited them. and the future stretched infinite and luminous before them. And as the tide rolled in, carrying the echoes of yesterday and the promise of tomorrow, one truth remained undeniable. Love, once found, could never be erased. To summarize this story, Ava lost her memory in an accident secretly caused by Lena. Julian, carrying the truth and his love for her, guided her through fragmented memories without revealing everything at once. Through tension, secrets, and small acts of care, Ava and Julian pieced their past together, faced deception, and finally reunited. In the end, love endured, trust was restored, and Mariner's Cove saw two hearts stronger than any obstacle. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more dramatic, intense romances. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for watching. I can't wait to share the next story with you.